Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. We had a wonderful year last year up to the pandemic. We got a lot of good things accomplished last year, particularly in the area of serving our students with some enhanced career services programs. We've really focused on getting students into internships, even co-ops, now that we have some programs that lends itself to. Particularly in business, we have phenomenal internships, and actually we've gotten a little bit choosy, not because we think that we're superior to anyone. It's just that we want the internship to be meaningful to students, and so when we get feedback from either the company or the student that it wasn't as good as it needed to be, then we will simply drop that company typically and move on to others. But we have placed a lot of students in some of the premier industrial organizations in the community, BMW for one, as well as many others. But that's something that we're very, very proud of. The other thing is we had a record enrollment last year.
How many was it?
It was right at 3,600, and we believe we get statistics a year later, but we believe that we were the largest private university in the state in terms of our FTE enrollment. There are some couple others that have larger head counts, maybe one that has larger head count than us. But when you look at enrollment on the FTE level,
remind people what that is.
Yes. FTE is an acronym for full-time equivalency. So basically, it takes 3 adult students to make up a full-time student, so to speak. And actually, I don't think it takes that many, but it's a fractional issue. So I think technically we were the largest private university in the state in terms of our overall teaching hours and credit hours. And so that's significant, even though we still have one institution that we are very commensurate with in terms of their enrollment. It's significant because prior to about 2 years ago, Anderson had never been anywhere near being the largest private university in the state. So we think the growth here is going to continue because we have new programs, and as long as students keep wanting to have a wonderful on-campus education as well as wonderful online educational opportunities, we think we're going to continue to grow. Our geography is good. Our brand has never been stronger. And we have some very good students. We're getting some of the top students in the state. Last year we had more Palmetto Fellows than all but one private university in the state. And if I were to tell you what that university was, you'd be impressed because it's a very good school. And it's probably not the one you're thinking of. But at any rate, we had more than all but one. And they only had, I think, maybe 3 to 6 more than we did. And Palmetto Fellows, by the way, is the most competitive scholarship. The most highly credentialed recipients get the scholarship, the ones that really have the very high SATs and the very high GPAs. And we have made quite a market in that type of student for the last few years.
And your nursing program, the graduate program, was the number one online graduate program in the state, correct?
I believe it was maybe the Upstate, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But
that program, nursing's really grown here over the last few years.
Yes, it's one of the top programs in the state. But I think technically there might have been one other institution that might have gotten a little higher marks than us. But substantively, it's one of the top programs in the state, and it's huge. Now, when I say nursing is huge, nursing is large, but it's actually our College of Health Professions that includes some other students. Our kinesiology students who oftentimes are going to go on to graduate school to be physical therapists, whether they go to school here or somewhere else for physical therapy school. And then we do have 2 full classes of our physical therapy program. We've been building that program, and it's a 3-year program. So we have first-year students and second-year students. Next year we'll add third-year students to the growth. and that will give us a total, I think, of about 82 to 84 Doctor of Physical Therapy students.
In June, you announced a new program to bridge digital skills and offer online digital marketing certificate. How will that help students, and why is that something y'all are interested in doing?
Well, any of our programs like that are non-credit, they're certificate programs. Any of those programs are available to our students, but we launched those programs primarily to give skills on top of degree credentials to individuals, or if a person doesn't necessarily have a degree, they can also begin to improve their credentials and their knowledge by getting a certificate in a certain area that doesn't take as long as a degree, of course, to finish. And our market for that really is individuals in the community as opposed to our students who are full-time students here. Although they're, as I said earlier, they're free to take those certificate programs if they'd like, but most of them are focused on just finishing their degree requirements. So these are open to the community. Oftentimes we have businesses that will want us to do a specific training module within their company, and we have a team now over in our Center for Innovation and Digital Learning, Innovative and Digital Learning, to work with individual companies to design online educational programs, whether they carry credit, certificate credit, or whether they're just specific to that company and there's no credit. We can do that now, and that business is really booming. It's not right now. It's not. We're not particularly making a lot of money there. It's more of a service to the community than anything else. But we do cover our cost, and we have some.
But it's affordable for
profit.
people who.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, these are certificate programs that may cost hundreds of dollars as opposed to thousands of dollars.
The other big announcement that you just made in July, I know you've been talking about it a long time and planning it, was the new College of Engineering. What led to the decision to add engineering to the mix here?
It's an interesting story. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to meet a professor who was with another institution at that time, an engineering professor. One of our members of our Board of Regents, Marshall and Betsy Pickens, invited us all to dinner, and we had dinner. We got acquainted, and then a few weeks later, I saw this gentleman in of all places, Publix. After work, we were both there doing a little shopping and probably both getting something for dinner that night. But I ran into Dr. Tony Giuseppe Ellie, and both he and his wife are engineers. He's been in academia. His wife has been in primarily industry. She now works for the EPA in Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, but their home is here in Anderson. And so Dr. Giuseppe said to me, "When are you going to start an engineering program?" And I said, "Well, we really haven't thought about that." I said, "Don't get me wrong, I'd love to have an engineering program. I just have not had that on the front burner, and we'd have to work through how we would structure that so that it would be competitive, because there are a lot of engineering programs in the area and in our state, and we'd have to do something pretty unique." And he said, "Well, you can do some things that those institutions are not necessarily going to do." And by that he meant not necessarily teach different kinds of engineering, but to approach the way we teach engineering in a different way. And his emphasis is on helping students become practical in their engineering skills early on in the curriculum as opposed to later. Many of the traditional research university and traditional engineering programs teach theory first and practice as a last element of the training. And while that is a very valid way to teach engineering, it produces something of a different effect than a program that starts out teaching practice first and theory later. One of the advantages of that is that I think we all know this, when you actually do something, you learn a lot about the nature of what you're doing. And when you can learn information by doing, when you have a mentor or a tutor, so to speak, you retain that knowledge. You don't forget it as easily as something that you've read in a book and you have just thought about. You've actually done it. And so we think that our program will address the needs of local industry that really need engineers, and need engineers that can step in the workplace and get started to work right away. And we think that that's going to be a service to a lot of our local industries, which is important to us. We want to serve our local community first, and then we want to serve the world after that. But that's very important to us.
How have the students responded? I mean, are you getting a lot of response for the engineering program, or?
Well, we just hired our dean, and that dean is Dr. Giuseppe Elli. He has spent the last 5 years as the head of biomedical engineering at Texas A&M University in preparation to come here to be our founding dean. This is a concept that we worked out a number of years ago, and it was just a sort of a gentleman's agreement. There were no written documents or anything like that. We just said, would you like to be our founding dean? Yes, I'd love to do that. We said, okay, well, we're gonna make it happen. There are no guarantees, but we'll work toward that. And so everything has fallen into place so far, and he is our founding dean. He's also in a position called Vice President for Industry Relations, which is very important because it's a liberal arts school, which Anderson was more like a liberal arts school 20 years ago than it is today. A liberal arts school doesn't have that much connection with industry, but an organization like ours, which is a comprehensive university now with both liberal arts and professional programs, as well as a research program, institutions like ours do have connections with industry, and we look forward to building a stronger relationship and stronger and more regular dialogue with them and about their needs and about our performance in training engineers for them.
All right, let's move ahead, and we're going to talk about the virus here in a minute too. We can't
Sure.
avoid it. But
Sure.
by the time people see this, most of the students are back on campus, and classes will probably be underway. Y'all published a lot about this, and you put it on your website. Remind people what precautions y'all have taken to keep the faculty and staff and administration safe.
Oh my. Well, excuse me, I'd probably need a list before me, in front of me, to be able to guarantee that I included everything, but I'll take a stab at it. The first thing that we did, like many institutions, probably all institutions in higher education in the spring, was because we knew very little about this virus, everybody took the precaution, or not necessarily the precaution, but is both a reaction and a precaution to get students off campus and at home so that they could best quarantine themselves and best stay away from potential infection. As we have learned more over the summer months, we know a little bit more about how to control the spreading of infection. And we have primarily followed CDC, Centers for Disease Control, and South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Affairs, and so we are in compliance with all of their recommendations to the best of my knowledge. I believe that we're in compliance with all of those, or that's been our goal. And that's important because there's a lot of misinformation out there about the virus, and there's a lot of unconfirmed information that's being passed around about the virus that may or may not be true. And so we don't count necessarily on media outlets or other sources as much as we do the Centers for Disease Control. We certainly listen to those things, pay attention to them, research them, but we're getting our primary guidance from the CDC and South Carolina DHEC because those are trusted, reliable sources. But we have done things like this semester, we're back at school. We start classes tomorrow. Our students will be required to wear masks inside buildings, as will all of us here on campus. Now it's possible that someone may forget a mask, but we actually have permanent masks that we've given students that they can that they can launder or wash out and keep fresh. But then we also have these throwaway masks that are all over the campus in dispensers, and so that's one of the main things that we have. We're also encouraging social or physical distancing, as we decided to call it, because it is more physical than social distancing. The 6 foot rule is very important, and we'll have to remind people of that all the time, because we're social beings and we like to be close to one another, and sometimes we get caught up in the conversation and we don't remember to do what we need to do. But I think we're getting more accustomed to that, and we will as the weeks go by. Our goal is to not have one infection, but realistically we know that most colleges that are going to have face-to-face instruction this year are going to have some infections. I think the question is, when does it get to a point when it's more than you can handle, or is more than as advisable to have? And that's a question that each individual institution will have to decide on their own. But we have protocols in place for quarantining and for isolation if we need to. We have some open beds in some homes that we own that are self-contained homes, and no danger of spreading anything to neighbors or anything like that. But we can keep students there for a period of time. We have been isolating or quarantining, rather, is a better word, I suppose, international students as they come in to go back to school. They have to stay in quarantine for at least 2 weeks. We've had some students who have shown some symptoms here and there, but none of them, as of today, the last information I have been confirmed with anything. It turns out, I think, perhaps someone just had a fever or someone had strep throat. As the semester goes along, we'll have people with a cold and flu, that type of thing, and we'll have people who present with symptoms. We'll have all of those tested. All of our student athletes will be tested in advance of any kind of practice that they may have this fall. Our South Atlantic Conference presidents voted unanimously to not conduct competitive events, so we won't be playing each other, but we will allow for some very safe coach overseen practices with our teams to keep them in shape and keep them interested and engaged in their sport.
Will intramurals be a part of that too? I mean, do we know yet?
That is a question I cannot answer at this point. We probably need to get a little further into the semester and see how things go there. But if we can do that, we will, but we won't do it if we can't do it safely. But
has it had any impact on the planning towards football? I mean,
not officially. There's always the possibility that because of this year's delay in life as we know it, so to speak, that it could necessitate adding a year onto our planning and implementation for football, but it's still our intention to do that.
Which pushed it to what year would that be if we pushed it?
Well, we indicated that we would start playing competitively in 2024, which means that we would field a team in 2023, but they would just do they would not be competing for conference championship or anything like that. They'd be playing various teams, but it wouldn't be official. So it could be that we might move that a year later and start playing officially in 2025. But one of our commitments with football, because it is a big endeavor, quite expensive, because we have to have a lot of new facilities, is that we're not going to rush into this. We're going to do it the right way. We're not starting football out of enrollment desperation. We're starting it from a position of strength, and we want every advantage that we can have. And plus, we don't want it to take resources away from any other programs that we have, and it won't. We've made that commitment. We're going to raise the money, and we're going to use other means to secure funds that will not invade other other things that we do, other sports program, other athletics programs, or academic programs.
Yeah, we went to athletics. I want to get back on the safety thing. Y'all hired a couple of new people, a contact tracer and a new health coordinator to
Yes.
help. Is that you think that'll help y'all as they move ahead here?
Oh, I think so, definitely. I think it's very important. We've learned to make sure that when someone is confirmed as infected with COVID, the first thing you want to do beyond getting that person treatment and in isolation is that you want to find out who they've been in contact with so that you can quarantine them. One of the, if I may say this, one of the neat things about being at Anderson University, if I can use that word neat, is that a number of years ago we made a decision to become a leader in mobile learning technology, and we've reached that status. As a matter of fact, we're a three-time recipient of Apple's Apple Distinguished Schools Award. Now, what they will say, if you go on their website, there'll be maybe 400 institutions worldwide that are Apple Distinguished Schools. These are oftentimes small schools with smaller enrollments, charter schools, that type of thing, that have focused on mobile learning technology, and they've implemented it, and to varying degrees. It may just be in one program, or it may be the entire institution. But there are less than 30 universities in the world that have this designation. And so we've been doing mobile learning and online learning and what we would call remote learning for a long time. And so our faculty are more adept than that than many faculty members at other institutions. Our students are more adept at using the technology, not as a toy or a convenience, as we used to use laptop computers in the classroom, but as a real learning tool to access information anywhere in the world that you happen to be at that time. And I have to say that our faculty just did an amazing job of transitioning to the mobile learning technology as a primary means of conducting their coursework during those weeks in the spring when we were not on campus. We also have structured our coursework, or our classes rather, such that we are achieving physical distancing of 6 feet between students and professors in our classroom. One of the ways that we've done that is simply by using our largest spaces more frequently. And we have also, because we have the mobile learning technology and every student has an iPad that's provided by the university as part of their package, we can divide a class rather, into a group of 2 or 3 groups. For instance, Tuesday, Thursday classes. Half the class would come in person to the class on Tuesday, and the other half would come on Thursday. And if you're not in person, you're in your residence hall room or the library or wherever you may be in a study room on campus, watching remotely the class. And I would make this distinction in that there is a difference between online learning, which is what you're going to hear most describe as what they're doing as online learning. There's a difference between that and remote learning. What we and most institutions, probably all of them, are doing with our traditional students is we're doing remote learning. True online courses are those that are structured to be delivered online with most of the content online, and they don't involve as much of the professor standing in front of the room conducting a lecture or a discussion by video. So it's easier in terms of the skills that you need, it's easier to conduct remote learning as opposed to true online learning. We deliver both here at Anderson. So whether we're having to transition to remote or to online teaching, we have those tools. And one of the things that has become evident with COVID is that all of our faculty members, particularly our full-time faculty members, need to be adept in online teaching, not just remote teaching, but online teaching. And so that's going to be a requirement of any new faculty member hired here.
And so that means they still can have interaction with a professor. It's just in a different format than in person.
Yes.
It's not just you fill this out and somebody grades it. And
Yes. So all of our students who are on campus, traditional students that we would call them, they are having the opportunity to go to class regularly. They may not go every day. They may be in their room watching remotely, but they're in their class. They're in some class daily or weekly, or however they structure their schedule.
how does it impact? I guess it's a little early to tell, but how do you think it'll impact the disciplines that require some of the students to get out in the community? I think about not only nursing but ministry and like some of the things you're talking about in industry, the co-ops and stuff. They've still got to get out and get around people. Is that going to be
Sure.
impacted by this, or we don't know yet?
Well, it was impacted in the spring. The nursing board from South Carolina and some of the accrediting boards had some concerns about contact in clinical settings, and so we took most of the nursing students out of the clinical settings in the spring, and the accreditors developed ways, or would allow us to develop ways to deliver clinicals in a different way. And so we did that, but that was a temporary measure. It was not something that we want to do permanently. Some people ask, well, does this help us by being able to do more clinicals in a virtual setting as opposed to a real life setting? And the answer is no. This is it's always superior to have clinicals in person dealing with real live human beings who are patients. So we'll be going back to that. It will just be highly supervised and will require all of the safety protocols of wearing masks. And in hospitals, particularly in certain areas of the hospitals, a more professional mask may be required, and that will all be done under the supervision of the hospital or the clinical environment. It could be a nursing home. It'll all be done under their supervision, as well as one of our faculty members or nursing staff members who are actually supervising those clinicals. So it'll have two levels of scrutiny, so to speak.
I interviewed David Larson. For decades, Anderson University has been sort of a hub for arts in the community, and he said they've found new creative ways to try to work around this, not having audiences and students.
Yes.
Not having. How important is that to the art students?
Well, I think it's very important because artists artists need to have clinical experiences too. They need to have experiences where they practice what they're being trained to do. And at our arts program, which is called the South Carolina School of the Arts, our program is in many ways more like a conservatory than the typical music department or arts department, theater department in a comprehensive university. And by conservatory, we mean that we're not just teaching these students about art, music, about theater. We are teaching them how to do it because we want them to be able to get jobs as performers and professionals, and we're getting a very good track record of that, particularly in New York and some other entertainment venues. So this program, South Carolina School of the Arts, is rapidly becoming a premier, if not the premier, arts program in our state. They have been able to develop some creative things. One of the things that they did just this past spring, after we were thrown into this necessity of being off campus, was that at commencement, we didn't have a commencement ceremony because we couldn't at that time, and we postponed that until October. But the choirs usually sing at commencement, and the choirs are just amazing here, and the ensembles that we have. But they actually individually, the students who are in the choir from wherever they live, their home, They individually recorded their part. It was mixed online, and you would have not known the difference if you'd been closing your eyes and listening to this in a performance hall, or listening by headphones or earphones to the recording. You wouldn't have known the difference unless you're highly trained in that area. It was just it was more than we expected of them, and so what we're finding is there are lots of different creative ways that teachers can teach and students can learn. Someone has to think about it for a few minutes and come up with an alternative way of doing it. It may not be the preferred way of doing it, but when you're in a bind, it works and suffices for what you need to accomplish.
And speaking of learning things, do you think that the pandemic times have brought lessons that might be valuable moving ahead, other than just distant learning and things you might be able to do better because you thought about it in a different way? Or
Well, yes, I think so. I think that, for instance, when we started learning about the pandemic and what institutions were doing, we had conversations with colleagues at other institutions. That's one of the things about the higher education community. Even though we compete for enrollment of students, higher education is not like the business world, in that we oftentimes, if we're doing something and if we can help another institution learn how to do something that we're doing that has become a best practice for the benefit of their students, we typically gladly share that kind of information. And so we talk a lot and collaborate a lot when we're in these situations. So we learned very early on that I heard college presidents saying, well, when we were talking about going online or going remote, how best to do that, how best to structure it. And so I was in conversation and Zoom conversations and conference calls with presidents who said, we don't have any online courses. We've never taught anything remotely. And I'm thinking, wow, I would not want to have to be in that situation. Not all of our faculty at Anderson necessarily taught an online course. Only some of them did. And so the ones who were not teaching online were not required to be adept in online methods. Now, we've changed that. As I said earlier, we've changed that, and every faculty member hired in the future, whether they're teaching online or not, will have to be trained and demonstrate proficiency in designing online coursework and conducting it online. So that's one of the major changes I think we will have going forward. I do think that we will probably, in the traditional university, we'll probably add more online elements to our delivery, because oftentimes that enables people to have outside employment, particularly adult students, if they're trying to go to school and hold down a job and family obligations at the same time. Particularly when it comes to adult and graduate studies, I think we'll probably do that. But even before the pandemic, here at Anderson, we had elements sometimes of coursework that was a face-to-face course, but it also had some hybrid, what we called hybrid. It was hybridized in that it was partly face delivery, partly online. And so for the convenience of some of our students, we would let them complete certain assignments. We would say asynchronously. In other words, it's not when everybody's together. There would be synchronous parts of the class where everybody's together, and then there would be asynchronous elements to the class, and that just allows for much more flexibility. And as students, we think, as future generations of students become more and more used to technology as a part of their educational landscape, that's just not going to be an issue. That'll be more of an expectation, we believe.
Are there any other major goals you had to adjust because of the changes in?
Right offhand, I can't think of anything except some of our capital projects. We had planned to do construction of one of the football facilities this past summer. We had plans to work on our financing for a future building to house the College of Christian Studies, and then on one floor, and then the College of Business on another floor. And instead of moving forward with those, we've postponed them, but they're still on our list of priorities and things that we want to do and will do if circumstances allow us. So we're not canceling those plans, but we are slowing a couple of them down. Right now, our focus needs to be on what we do at the core of our organization, and we do lots of things, but the main thing we do is teaching and learning. And so right now we're just focusing on making sure that we can deliver a wonderful teaching and learning experience for our students. And so we're saying some of these other things can wait, even though we don't want them to wait. They can wait. What we need to do is make sure this year is successful in allowing students to get the coursework that they need, the credits they need, the academic credit that they need, to not be delayed in their attainment of their degrees and in the attainment of getting on with their careers.
For people who haven't been following the growth of Anderson University over the last decade and a half, let's just remind them, you know how many students you got coming in this year? I also wanted to kind of talk about how many different disciplines you offer, and just kind of, you mentioned it earlier, but sort of your goals and mission here.
Yes. In terms of students, we have a record number of new students this fall, which is, I'll just say that we're thankful for that. I know that a lot of people have worked awfully hard to make that happen, but we have always said as a Christian university that we also acknowledge that God adds a great measure of blessing to everything that we do that's successful at AU. And we believe that, and so we have grown. I think our enrollment this year will be, the latest report I got was that we might be up as much as 10% or so like that, which will just be remarkable. Now, part of that is due to some new programs that we started, and one of those is lacrosse. So we brought in 30 new lacrosse players. We brought in, I think, about 15 new cybersecurity majors. We started a cybersecurity program this year, and we also started a PhD program, and we have around 50 students in that new PhD program. And so part of the growth is due to that. But in terms of the traditional enrollment, we continue to see higher retention. Most institutions would love to have the retention that we have, which this year is around 86% of freshmen from one year to the other. The average is probably less than 70%, and so the retention has helped. The recruitment efforts have helped. We've never had 800 new students before in 1 year at the beginning of the fall semester, and so I think that our enrollment will certainly be at least 3,700. It will probably be more than that. I don't think we'll reach the 4,000 mark this year, but we may come close to it.
And I know I'm asking you to run through a lot of stuff without notes, but can you run through the different schools, colleges? I mean,
sure, I can try.
Okay.
There is the College of Arts and Sciences, which includes your things like the natural sciences, math, English, foreign languages, history, social programs, psychology, those kinds of programs. Then we have the College of Education, which is teacher education, offering through the master's degree, and then we'll have we're developing an EDD that will be available within the next year. In that college, we have the School of Interior Design. It's not a College of Interior Design because there's just one interior design program, so it's called a school as opposed to a college, which is a collection of academic programs. The College of Business, which offers multiple programs, including they have one of the tracks in the PhD program that we have. So There's that. There's a College of Health Professions, as I mentioned earlier. The South Carolina School of the Arts, which is equivalent to a College of Visual and Performing Arts and other institutions, a conservatory, and then we have the new College of Engineering. Yes, the College of Public Safety and Homeland Security.
And traditionally you've had a strong religious education portion. Y'all have expanded that, right? I mean, the offerings.
Yes, I left that one out. That's pretty important. The College of Christian Studies.
Yeah.
College of Christian Studies offers programs from bachelor's level to the doctorate, including the PhD. They also offer a Doctor of Ministry program, and that's been a growing program at AU.
All right, we've talked a lot about education and learning, and you've been here almost 20 years now. What are some of the things you've learned as president of Anderson University?
Well, I think probably the most important personal thing that I've learned is that I hope that I've learned how to be a better leader every day, every week, every month, every year. There's at some point you get enough experience that you begin to have, maybe you might have a little bit of wisdom, or you hope you do. And so I think I'll know a little bit more about what I'm doing than I've ever known before. And it's sort of like medicine. It's something that you practice, you don't perfect. You just try to do your very best and get better at what you do. I have learned, I have had confirmed rather, that there is tremendous potential at Anderson University. There has always been goodness at this institution. When Diane and I first came here 18 years ago, one of the things that we noticed very early on was we noticed the heart of people who worked here. And we have always said that there is tremendous goodness in the hearts of the people who work here. So we didn't need to work on that. What we needed to work on were some organizational issues. We needed to work on our culture. It needed to be far more entrepreneurial and innovative. It needed to be far less passive-aggressive in nature. That's a problem for any organization. And you never drive out all the passive aggressiveness in an organization, but you try to minimize it as much as possible. And that has been a tremendous transformation at AU. So I've learned a little bit about how you do that and how you don't do it. I have learned that oftentimes people outside your own town know more about your growth and your success than some people who live right next door to the campus, and that's not a criticism. It's just a reality sometimes, because when you live close to an institution, you take it for granted, or you have it in this conceptual box that you constructed in your mind years ago, and you don't think that it can grow beyond that box, so to speak. That's one of the things that I have learned. I have learned that too. Also, that's related to that, though. Once people in your community know what's going on the campus, and they realize that there is growth and refinement and change, if it's going in the right direction, they get behind it and they support it and they're proud of it. Another thing that I've learned is that Anderson, the city of Anderson, the county of Anderson, the upstate is a wonderful place to live. It's a wonderful place to do what we do. So those are some of the takeaways that I think I've learned, both personally and professionally, from doing what we do. Another thing that I have learned that's very important, I think, about college work is that colleges cannot be static. You have to be rethinking the way you do things all the time. If you're not growing, you're falling behind. If you're not advancing your knowledge and your ability and new technology and new ways of doing what you do, you're falling behind, and we don't want to fall behind. So we're obsessed, if I can use that word, we're obsessed with innovation and entrepreneurship that is calculated to the point that we don't take on unnecessary risk, but is aggressive enough that we stay ahead of the trends and that we are leading in some of those trends as opposed to following sometimes. So that's very important. Just like an industry has research and development, we have research and development too here with our own programs. We're constantly looking at what we need to be doing, what we need to be offering, what the community needs, what the region and state and the nation need, and trying to respond to those needs.
And I guess finally, you're talking about people knowing what's going on. What's the best place? Remind people the best place to look to find out what's going on at Anderson University and to keep up with what's going on here.
Yes, we we have we've had some very creative staff, and we had a page that we called it in the beginning our COVID-19 page. Now it's called the Journey Ahead section of our website. So you can access that on our website, see all of our protocols, all the things that we're doing to minimize the possibility of infection on our campus, or minimize the spread of infection on our campus, and keep people safe. Lots of Q&A on there that is particularly interesting to students and parents, but it's also out there for anyone who wants to see what we're doing. We're getting some inquiries from media about some of the things that we're doing because they had heard that we've been doing some things very, very well. And so that's always flattering when you get those inquiries. We've had some other institutions call us and ask us some of the things that we're doing. And again, if I were to tell you the names of these institutions, which I won't just for professional reasons, but there's some very impressive institutions that have called us and said, before we do this, we want to see what you guys are doing. We've heard that you all are doing some really neat things there. And so that's flattering, and we're happy to share the information with others because we are for and about students and about education. That is our mission. That is our purpose at Anderson, and we have an affinity with other colleges and universities, whether public or private, Christian or secular. We are educators, and we want to do everything we can to help students learn, whether they're here or whether they're somewhere else.